All right. Sorry about the delay, guys. I think we're live. Let's see here. I think we're all live, right, Lane?
We are.
We'll jump in there. Cool. All right, perfect. So I see a bunch of comments already. We're a few minutes late. We're waiting on some technical difficulties from Devine. He's working on it. But I'll just kind of kick it off here while we're waiting for him to get on. Basically, I know everyone always asks me questions about mythology, and I just put eye drops in, so I probably look like I'm crying. But everyone always asks me about mythology and how I got into it, or what I read, or what I look into, and why. And so I just figured that'd be a cool topic of conversation where I can kind of expound, because a lot of times it's more than a one-word answer, or yeah, I like Greek myth, and that's kind of a basic, really simple answer. And so it's something that fascinates me, just like human psychology, philosophy in general. And so it's just one of my favorite things to talk about, or to study, or to research, or whatever, just so I can find ways to twist it up and distort it with my typical books. So I wanted to kind of jump into that today. And I'll say this in the beginning: if you guys have any questions specifically, put them in the comments starting right now, and we're going to be going. Lane will be going through them and posting them once we hit kind of a slower point. Once Devine, runs out of questions, or we're just kind of rambling on about something. So just post any questions you have, whether it's Norse or Viking, or a philosophical question, or the hero's journey, or whatever it is that kind of floats your boat. Some kind of specific character. Just post it if you have any questions whatsoever for me, for Devine, for the Templeverse. Some kind of pantheon that I haven't touched, or why I haven't touched, or will I, bring it into the Templeverse at some point, or Soren's books, or anything like that. Just go ahead and ask, and we'll be scrolling through that. So I think is Devine still lingering out there somewhere? He was trying to get in.
He's lingering. He said 30 seconds. So.
So that's no problem. So while he's doing that, I've got a pile of mythology books here that I just kind of picked up off the cuff. But I've got Faust. So if you can read it here, hold it crooked. These are just, there he is. All
What's
right.
going on, man? I am so sorry.
You ruined Friendsgiving. You just absolutely ruined Friendsgiving.
I know.
No, not a big deal at all, dude. Don't worry.
So, it was crazy. So I'm like, so it started raining out here. I'm in Arizona. It's monsoon season. So I was actually watching the previous stream with Ty, and it was really choppy. So I'm like, well, let me just go ahead and restart everything, just make sure that everything is good and fine. So I restarted everything. Of course, that fixed most of the issues. Then I'm trying to get the page. Well, I was trying to get Facebook Messenger's app pulled up on the Mac, but for whatever reason, it didn't want to open up. So I'm like, oh, come on. So I went manual, typed in the address myself. So then I typed it in Safari, and it's like, oh, you can't use Safari. I'm like, oh, come on. So then I had to update Firefox, because I hadn't used it since the last time that we streamed way earlier this year. So I was waiting for that to update, and then I finally get it up, and I got the light on behind me, but it was still dark because it was behind me. So I went and grabbed the lamp from my bedroom, and then I'm trying to plug that in, and I unplugged the router on accident. I'm like, oh my goodness.
No problem, man. This is the late night thing. It's supposed to be a shit show, so don't worry. If you would have been on time, I would have made it a shit show. So don't worry.
Right.
But no, man, good to talk to you. I was kind of hinting earlier. This is Devine Davis, and he actually won a contest, and I can't remember what book.
Oh no, it wasn't last year. It was a prize.
Yeah,
last year's Friendsgiving, you did all the prizes, and one of the prizes was to have a phone call with you.
Yeah, and so we actually did a Zoom call instead of just a phone call, and we started chatting, and he just had some really cool conversations, really cool questions, and we just kind of found that we jived really well, and I just thought he was fun to talk to, and so I was like, well, man, we should make this live, and then we kind of watched it, and we're like, we talked about some things that we probably don't need to make live, and so we figured we'd try to set something different up, and I was like, hey, he'd be great to talk to about mythology. So, I don't know if you want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh yeah, I was actually while I was trying, like I said, I was watching the stream with Ty, and I'm a veteran. I'm an Air Force veteran as well. So he said that he was one. I was like, hell yeah, air power.
Yeah.
So it's cool. So I mean that's a little bit about me. I am an Air Force veteran. I was stationed at Hickam Air Force Base, which is right next to Pearl Harbor. If anybody knows anything about Pearl Harbor, Hickam and Pearl Harbor were part of the same thing. I got out of the Air Force about 7 or 8 years ago. I can't remember anymore now. It's been so long. And then I went to Germany for a little while. I lived in Germany for about a year or so. And then I came back to the States, and I've lived in Arizona ever since. I live in a very, very small town in southern Arizona. Most people never heard of it. But if you know anything about like U.S. history or military history, Buffalo Soldiers, I'm in that area.
Okay.
Geronimo, Cochise, those guys were all in this, are all down in this little area here.
That's awesome.
So that's me. As far as reading, I had a interesting origins when it comes to reading. My mom was one of those like heavy-handed academic parents.
Yeah.
So she kind of
the best and worst.
So she kind of I was very resistant to reading. So she kind of like beat it into me. But then after I got it down and I mastered it, I just took off with reading all the time. I've actually got a funny. Well, I'm not gonna tell that story now. I'll message you later. I'll tell you that story later. So, I've always loved urban fantasy. I think probably one of the earliest ones that I ever really picked up that made an impact was James Patterson's Maximum Ride series. Yeah. I don't know if you ever read that one.
I have, yeah.
But that was kind of it. That was kind of my big introduction into to urban fantasy from there, and loved it. I've read Patricia Briggs, Kim Harrison, Jim Butcher, you name him. I've read it. I started reading it at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's got a lot of them. So yeah, you got to catch up.
Yeah, I recently while I was reading, of course, I was reading your books, and it's funny how I kind of stumbled across those. I just saw an ad. I saw an ad for Unchained, and I'm very much an Apple person. Is what it is. So I was looking for the books on, the Apple Books app, and I couldn't find it. So I sent you a message, and I was like, "Hey, are you anywhere else except for Amazon? Because I'm not really like a big Amazon shopper, or whatever." And you're like, "No, only on Amazon." But the book looked so interesting enough, and the cover, the cover art from it was interesting enough. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pick it up. Picked it up, loved it.
Yeah,
absolutely loved it. And then I think if I recall correctly, Nate makes an appearance in
book one.
Unchained, and he was kind of a dick, and I was like, I kind of like this guy, so I started from the beginning, and worked my way up. Unfortunately, everybody's gonna hate me, but I have actually not finished all of the books yet. I just haven't. It's been a hectic year. I just haven't had time, and I got to be in that. I got to be in that mental space for me to actually enjoy it, because I can listen to it, I can listen to it or I can read it, but I'm not going to retain any of it. I'm not going to enjoy any of it or whatever. So I think I read everything chronologically from all 3 series. I think currently I'm on Black Sheep.
Nice. Okay.
So I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So I'm getting there.
But hey, you got to read at your own pace, man. And it's been a crazy year for everyone. So yeah, I mean, basically the apocalypse started sometime in the last 4 months.
Literally. Literally.
I'll make sure I don't spoil anything.
Yeah, I've had quite a few deaths in the family just in the last year or so, and it's been rough, and it's like I can't. It's once that you start getting comfortable with your normal your acceptance, something else happens. It's like and I'm in the process of trying to move and take a new job, so it all comes all at the same time.
I hear you, man.
But overall, I mean, love it. Absolutely love the work that you've done. I love that you're very in touch with your readers. I actually. So funny story. The new girlfriend, she's also very much a reader. Urban fantasy is her thing. Like it's weird how much stuff that we have in common. Like I'm kind of waiting for like the other shoe to drop at this point. But I made some recommendations. We purchased a couple books on her Kindle, and I got her Obsidian Sun.
Okay.
But I've made the mistake of also including several other of the authors that we just spoke of.
Yeah.
And she got stuck on Stormfront because she is like a big crime mystery type person.
Yeah.
As
So
well as, a fantasy person. Yeah. So I'm like, come on, man. You're
hurry up.
supposed to read Obsidian Sun first.
Hurry up.
But
awesome.
but she's going to get around to it. But yeah, man, everybody that I speak to, ironically, I don't know if you saw the post, my supervisor at work now, he's actually read your books.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I went to we have a bookstore out here from like the library where they like sell old books. And I saw a couple copies. I think it was like Grimm.
Yeah.
Obsidian Sun. I think it was like the first 3 or 4 books.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, I'm like, who would have had these? And come to find out, he had donated them.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like,
that's awesome.
Wow. I was like, that's small town.
That's really cool.
Interesting.
Every time I run into one in the wild, I'm like, wait, what? It's supposed to be an ebook.
Right.
What are the paperbacks doing out in the world?
Right. And I've bought 3, 4, 5, 6 copies for friends. I'm just like, hey, what's your address? And they're like, it's this. Why? I was like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
They get a book in the mail, and everyone that's read it so far, they've really liked it.
Then you've got awesome friends. Then that's all I can say. So
I'm an awesome friend.
That's true. That should be stated first. You're absolutely right, man. So yeah, so
my notes from the last time that we talked.
I was looking for the same thing, and I couldn't find them, but I just remember you had some really insightful questions, and so I was just going to kind of touch on my kind of introduction to why I started falling in love with mythology, and then we just kind of chat back and forth. And it doesn't have to be any kind of interrogation or anything. If you have questions, interrupt. We put a bunch of, I think everyone's throwing their own questions into the comments too. So Lane will be pulling those up at some point.
I was gonna say I don't see any comments. I'm looking around.
Oh yeah. Lane will pull them up. Yeah, I can see them all right now. They're on the side of my screen. So
hi, Lane. I know he's back there somewhere. I know you got him in the closet.
Yeah. So he's hiding somewhere. he'll pop up, and we'll see him here in a second. But yeah, I was just showing people. Just off the beginning here, some of the books that I've got just on on mythology in general. I've got H.A. Gerber's Classical Mythology. It's a lot of Greek. And I've got
that's cool.
Wolfgang van Goethe, Faust.
Okay.
So making a deal with the devil. I've got Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. I wasn't like a crazy fan of it. It was really interesting.
I think after Warhammer.
Yeah,
I put the books down for a little bit, and I just read American Gods. I got the 10th anniversary edition.
Yeah,
amazing.
Oh, Neil Gaiman's incredible. It wasn't like this book is specifically. It's not a story. It's not a fiction. It's like a retelling. So I guess it is fiction, but it's a retelling of what he thinks. Some of the stories would have been, and he kind of clarifies.
It froze on me for a second.
So it's interesting, but then I got Paradise Lost, Milton.
Okay.
I've got a bunch of crazy ones. Dictionary of Demons, and then I've got one for angels too. But yeah, I pick up anything and I kind of look through it. But my first foray into mythology was when I was just a kid, and I used to really idolize people. I always wanted a hero. I always wanted some kind of role model, someone to worship. And I didn't know mythology. I didn't know anything like that, but we were moving around a lot when I was a kid. And so my dad worked a ton. And I really just kind of wanted to have like a stable hero to kind of emulate or imitate. And every time I picked one, whether it was a family member, teacher, cousin, whatever it was, I always felt like I was let down at some point. And even if they didn't
fatal character flaw.
Yeah. Like even if they didn't do anything bad, I think I idolized them too much. And so I held up to too high of a standard, and they ended up just being human. And I was like, oh, screw them. They're not hero. And I'm a kid. So I'm like, whatever, no way. They're not role models. Yeah. And so I decided to find out what a hero was and what things I liked. And you'll see me kind of glancing to the side. I wrote a bunch of notes down, but I decided to kind of make my own hero and kind of Frankenstein bits and pieces of different, stories or movies or, Ninja Turtles or whatever it was, anything that I started out with on why do I like Michelangelo? Why do I like Raphael? Why do I not like Leonardo? Whatever it was. And then I started learning about Hercules and some of these Greek stories. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I realized that the things that I gravitated towards were the characters, whether cartoons, movies, books, who loved facing danger. They didn't run away from it. They didn't hide from it. They loved the process of facing danger because of what would be on the other side of that danger. And so when they heard about the Hydra, coming over the mountains or whatever, they got excited because they've been waiting and training to face that monster. And that was what really got me going, is like, wow, these aren't people that accidentally stumbled into a monster and survived or won. It's people who sought out danger and they wanted to face it because they wanted to prove themselves. And I was like, that is amazing, because you don't see that nowadays. You see, and I was a kid, but you see men that they would face danger if they confronted it and couldn't get out of it, but you hardly ever saw people looking for it and excited to find it. And that was just what really got me going. And then it kind of led me down the rabbit hole of just a lot of the Greek myths. And there was a class of people that lived for the moment of facing danger and out heroing everyone else around them. And that was their job. I mean, they would do whatever they had to do during the day, but every second that they had free, they were training to like face that monster whenever they heard about it, so they could get on their horse and go chase it down, be the first one there to fight it. I was like, that's amazing. And so it just really kind of, it let me have a hero without the risk of disappointing myself. Now, all of those heroes had flaws and stuff, of course. There's Icarus, who was, so vain that he thought he could fly to the sky. But when it came to fictional characters, I could, or, heroes or whatever from, stories, I could look at their flaws and say, yeah, but they did these great things. But when it came to real people,
be more objective.
Yeah, I couldn't
be more objective when it's a story.
Yeah, when it was real people, I couldn't separate it. But when it came to fictional characters, I could say, yeah, okay, he tried too hard or whatever. Who thinks they can fly to the sun? But then I was like, but he tried to fly to the sun. That's amazing. Yeah. Like, who does that? He sought danger because he wanted to be the first one to fly. And like, their dream was so much bigger than their fear. And so that was always just so fascinating to me as a kid. And so I ended up just kind of, frankensteining, like I said, these heroic qualities or traits or accomplishments or achievements together. And then I realized, when I was 12 or whatever, I was kind of a loner, and I got bullied pretty badly at school. And
I've been there.
Yeah, like really, really badly, where on my birthday, like my 12th birthday, I came home from school. And on the bus ride home, everyone started making fun of me and like singing a song, making fun of me all together. And so it was horrible. I was crying, and I came home and I told my grandpa about it. And he said, you're never going to let this happen again. And I was looking for a hug or candy or something. And he's like, no, you're going to suck it up, and you're never going to let this happen again. And I was like, well, I didn't do anything. What do you mean? I didn't let it happen. And he said, you let your emotions happen. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you handled it the way you did. You chose to get upset instead of just letting it roll off your back. Yes, they did something terrible, but you could have chose a different reaction. And so there's responsibility involved in how you deal with, unfortunate situations.
Don't give them the benefit of a reaction.
Exactly. And I was 12, so I was like, what are you talking about? Where's my sucker, my candy? Like, give me something.
I think I was about the same age when I had that.
It's my birthday, man. Come on. Like, don't give me a life lesson. But then I kind of thought about it. And so I just made a commitment myself that day that even if something terrible happened, I was never going to let my emotions take the reins. And so I started looking more into just kind of self-growth and confidence and how to, shrug those things off if they ever did happen. And then I realized, well, I've got these heroes that I kind of made up, or these qualities at least that I made up. And so I started researching them more. And then I realized, there's this thing called philosophy. And I started looking at philosophy, and it's, how do you build a, epistemological system, and etymology and ethics and morals. And I started realizing, well, I've already been doing that with my hero building. I just didn't know it. And so I had already been studying philosophy, and Socrates and Aristotle talking to Achilles or Alexander the Great and showing them how to achieve greatness. And so it really just I realized that I accidentally tripped into philosophy as a kid. And then at 12 years old, I consciously chose to just kind of run down that rabbit hole and say, okay, well, if bad things are going to happen to me, I'm not going to sit there and take it. I'm going to figure out how to fight it any way I can. You can either laugh or cry about something, and I'd rather laugh about it. And so that was kind of my introduction to mythology. And then from that Frankensteining process, I later realized that I'd become pretty good at building characters. And so I decided, well, why don't I write a series of all the things I love and make some of these flawed characters heroic, and let my readers see that you can be flawed and have mistakes and be broken in some way. But when you're broken, the pieces of you are much sharper and much more dangerous. So that's actually a weapon. And so you don't have to be ashamed of those flaws. You have to emphasize them and highlight them and learn how to use them. And so I just realized that I could make these cool characters that are broken or twisted or have made mistakes or, whatever it is, but they could still be great in their own way. And so that was kind of my foray into realizing that everything kind of led up
and
to
what you just explained is why I hate Batman and Superman with a passion.
Yeah,
and Superman with a passion.
Oh yeah, they're perfect.
They're
Batman's less.
Yeah, they're too perfect.
Yeah,
still too perfect for my life.
Yeah,
So I totally get that, and that's what I like as well. It's very, and maybe it's, I'm thinking of like a lot of the stories that I would read growing up, because I mean, when you're writing for adults or teenagers and you're writing for kids, you don't have to be so cut and dry.
Yeah.
But some characters to me were just like, it's too perfect.
Yeah.
It's too perfect. Nobody's that perfect. Everybody has a fatal flaw, whatever it is. Even the most perfect person in the world
absolutely
has a fatal flaw somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And that's one reason a lot of the famous fantasy I never really got excited about, like Lord of the Rings. Frodo was too perfect, and Boromir and all those guys, they were just too perfect. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, tell me about Gollum. Like, I want to hear how his story happened. And like, I was always more interested in the flawed things because that's more relatable to readers. And rather than saying, hey, be perfect, it's, hey, try not to be as bad as you are. Because if I could find a way to make myself 10% better than I was yesterday, that's amazing, because the ripple effects are going to hit my family, my sister, my, as a kid, my immediate friends, my teachers are gonna be like, wow, Shayne's much better mood or much more helpful or, whatever. And so I was like, if I can improve myself a little bit, there'll be a, exponential growth around me. And then I started realizing as an author, when I wanted to become an author, is if I can show people how to make themselves 1 or 10% better, I mean, we could have a renaissance overnight. And it's not about me. It's just letting them accept the fact that you can be flawed and still do amazing things. Like you can use that as a weapon. And that's part of the hero's journey. They get knocked down, and then the getting knocked down is what makes them learn something to make themselves better. Yeah. And so I was like, well, that's the most important part of the hero's journey then, is having a flaw. And I was like, so why don't I show people to turn that flaw into an asset, a strength? That's always been my goal, is to just show people that you don't have to be Frodo Baggins. You know what I mean? Like you can be,
and that's why they're such great characters.
It's just fun. It's fun to do that, and I think it resonates with my readers. It sure seems to. And then just my love of mythology makes me enjoy bringing the characters into the books and showing them doing whatever.
That's what makes them all great characters. And then specifically, if we talk about Nate, for example, Nate, outsider looking in, has everything that he could possibly want. That was the point. He has always had everything that he could possibly want. Yeah. But he's still flawed because emotionally, those things were missing. Yeah. And that, thinking of like my upbringing, like, because I'm a third generation vet.
Yeah.
third generation. And like my dad, my dad, like stone cold American badass
Yeah.
all day. But with him, a lot of stuff was like he would compartmentalize a lot of things. He wasn't very emotionally available.
Yeah.
So growing up and, then becoming an adult and kind of being, I think everybody kind of gets pushed out into the adult world to a certain extent.
Yeah.
You live in a kind of little bubble as you're growing up, and then once you become an adult, that bubble kind of shatters, and
Yes.
you kind of figure out what the world's about. And I see myself a lot in Nate.
Yeah.
Of okay, I didn't have the worst childhood ever. I was definitely a lot more well off than probably a lot of my peers, but there wasn't that family, that strong emotional connection with like my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So Nate definitely touches me in that regard.
That was kind of one thing with Nate, is that I wanted him to look not perfect. I wanted him to look like the epitome of you got it all. And so I gave him a mansion and I took away his parents. And he's got this beautiful facade, but all the lights are off inside. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of the point, is to give him this beautiful structure, figuratively and literally, where it seems like he's got everything he wants, but he's got a lot of flaws. And then he's got a mansion with no one inside, figuratively. And so he's got things, but then he's got nothing. And so I really wanted to show that, but I didn't want to make it, too simple and too obvious.
One of my favorite dynamics, one of my favorite kind of character dynamics with Nate is Nate and Alucard.
Yeah.
Because Nate has a lot of love, respect, and cares deeply for Alucard, but and also I guess Gunnar to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But he's such an asshole because that's the only way that he knows how to show affection.
Yep.
It's being a jerk to everyone.
Yeah. And it's also intentional in a way. Nate doesn't know this, but for me as an author writing Nate and Alucard, I make Nate be an asshole sometimes because, one, he's got a messed up childhood, but two, it's because
a really messed up childhood in a way you would never expect if you actually
and that was kind of the point, is that my thing was minor as a kid, but to me it was everything, right? That bullying situation.
Oh, absolutely.
It's nothing in the scheme of things, but to me it was the worst thing ever. But it's also the thing that made me say the next morning, never again. This will never happen again. And so I changed that moment when my grandpa told me that. And I promised that I would never be that way again. And that anytime something bad like that happened, I would become stronger. And so that's one reason I've had all the parents of the different characters in the Templeverse do something terrible to their kids, or do something that causes terrible things to happen. Not that they're abusive or anything, but they do something that hurts the kids early. Because I feel it's not at the level of the characters that they go through, but to some degree, going through trouble and facing a flaw and facing a danger and facing something hard makes you stronger. And so I kind of wanted to overemphasize that point, that you don't want to live in a bubble your whole life, because then when that bubble shatters, when you turn into an adult, you've got no experience, you've got no defenses, you've got nothing going for you. And so little bits of pain along the way help you become stronger. They give you calluses, they give you muscles, they make you more prepared to not just survive, but thrive later on. And so that's always been my point. Obviously I over exaggerate it with my characters because it's fantasy.
Oh, absolutely. And
in real life, I think it's a very healthy thing, and it's a very beneficial thing. If that wouldn't have happened to me, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am right now.
About 2 weeks ago, when I started Black Sheep, I cussed you out when I found out Callie's real name.
You cussed me out when what?
When I found out Callie's real name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. But it was so, like, when you first hear it, you're like, wow, But then if you think about it and you think about all the stories, especially if you've read them, if you read all of the series,
Yeah.
and if you read Nate Temple, Feathers and Fire, and Phantom Queen Diaries, if you read them, if you read them all in chronological order,
yeah,
the way that they're I guess intended to be read, there's so many breadcrumbs. But because there's so many other things going on, and you're misdirecting in so many different directions, you're not picking those up. And then finally, when something comes out, you're just like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, I should have seen that coming. Well, a lot of times I'll put the hint out there, so you say, oh, you know what, it might be this. And then I totally change course and just go off on a subject, and you're like, no, he wouldn't make it that easy, would he?
Oh, there's a ton of mental gymnastics that goes on in these books.
Like, damn, I knew it.
Yeah. There's a ton of mental gymnastics that comes up on these books, and I'm just like, why? Why? So sometimes you gotta close the book, put it down.
Yep. You gotta put me in the corner. Yeah.
And come back.
So we've got. Hold on, let me check one thing real quick. I'm trying to see if
what pantheon speaks to you the most, draws you to wanting to know more. You know what? I could probably answer this one if I had to guess.
Go right ahead. Go ahead and guess.
Norse.
That's a very close second. Only
close
because,
second. Ooh.
Oh, very close second. Yeah, only because I would say Greek has to be first because it was the most readily available. So I read it.
Yeah, sure.
And there's so much proof to certain stories, like with Alexander the Great. Like it kind of has a trail of stories, whereas the Norse, it's a lot of campfire stories that were later written down, and so there's not as much to read. So as a kid, I read a ton of the Greek stuff because it was available. The Norse stuff was harder to find, especially as a kid version. So
absolutely. I think Norse has had a big resurgence in the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah. So as I got older, I'm loving it, but there was very little of it when I was young. So it's not necessarily that I appreciate it more, but in a way, the Greek dives more into the psychology and philosophy of heroes, and so you get a much more personal look at their flaws and their strengths and their virtues and vices and why they do things and why they don't. And then there's Clash of the Titans, where you get to see how malevolent the gods are. And so there was just a lot more to pick apart, whereas with the Norse, there wasn't that for me to find as a kid. So I would say Greek first, but it's all a rabbit hole. I mean, it's all a gateway drug. And so I've dived into, pretty much everything I could think of. I was in martial arts for a long time.
Yeah.
So I dove into a lot of that, all the Eastern philosophies and Buddha and, the Sun Tzu and all the philosophy and the war generals. And
the one that impressed me, the one reading that impressed me is that you got into Hindu mythology. That's
Hindu?
Hindu, yeah. That's almost never touched whatsoever.
I mentioned that earlier. That was a tough one for me to decide to do because I know it can be very touchy. And so I had to make sure that I got it right while not, sugarcoating it. Like I wanted to do the typical Shayne thing where I poke fun at it, but I'm still honorable and respectful, but I can, we can still have fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. I actually had some, I don't call them this, but I had some sensitivity readers that were Indian and they followed Hindu religion. So they dove into it and they're like, dude, this is fucking amazing. Like you nailed it. You didn't, you made me mad because you had Shiva do this or Ganesh do that, but you nailed it. Like you brought up things that I know authors that have done Indian series where it's like the Indian gods, and they didn't pick up half the details that you dug up in your research, like with Shiva having, this symbol or the bull having this color. And like, he's like, there's certain things you picked up that no one ever talks about. Ganesh is much more than an elephant headed god with 4 arms. You know what I mean? Like, and so he's like, you dove into like a certain scar that he had.
He's very much a trickster.
Absolutely.
And I think he can get Hermes to run for his money.
Absolutely.
In some of his stories.
Ganesh is dangerous. And it's like, and they were like, you talked about a scar that he has on his arm, and no one ever talks about that, or like that's
Mhm.
not specific, but there was some meticulous details that I dove into, and they're like, no one ever talks about that. I don't even know how you found that out. But I try really hard to do that, because if I'm going to poke
And
fun
you-
at something, I need to also
Yeah.
be
No,
very
and you do a
respectful
really
of the
good job
truth.
at it. And the last time that we spoke, I asked you about, I was like, how do you, how do you write about, look, I'm looking at my notes here. I was like, how do you write about mythology and folklore without offending those who, have, deeply held belief systems, or it's an actual still an active religion.
Yeah.
Because I think, what's his name? Rick Riordan, he ran into that back in 2018.
Yeah.
And it was, he had to issue an apology. He was like, my bad. I did not know there were still people that, practice Hellenism.
Yeah. And so part of that is I'm never going to win that battle.
Absolutely not.
Something I say will offend someone, and to them I say, okay, don't read it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, but don't read it. Like, I don't know what else to tell you, because if we're going to put gloves and soft mitts on everything and bubble wrap everything to make everyone safe, it's going to be a gray world of tapioca pudding and gray clouds. Like,
but I think you just have a way of doing it too, where it's not. It can be. It's funny, and it's just the appropriate amount of funny, but you're also shining light on what most people wouldn't know about. And like with Quinn, nobody knows who the Morrigan is.
Yeah, and that one, to be fair, that's all Cameron. I help
Really?
him. Yep, I help him with kind of big picture stuff, or the end where I look at what he's done. But he, from start to finish, like we talked about the beginning arc where it's going to go, and then we talk about big series stuff where it's going to go. Everything else within the ends of those spines are his. And so when he put, I think it was Wukong in the very beginning, Sun Wukong or something, all the Morrigan stuff. Like, I knew about the Morrigan stuff because that was the main premise that no one found out.
I knew about it too, but like, you never hear about her.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. And that's one reason. That's why we called it the Phantom Queen Diaries, because that's one of her names. And so we, like, that one I knew, but a lot of the stuff that he's dove into, it's all him. He's just as fascinated with this as I am. I mean, maybe in different ways, but he's an academic at heart. I mean, he was a teacher, and so he approaches it probably a little differently than I do. Where I'm fascinated with the psychology and the heroism, but I think he's just academically fascinated. But we can ask him tomorrow. He's going to be with us tomorrow, so we can pick his brain.
I wouldn't know unless I knew that between the three series, there's two authors there.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because he writes everything, and then I go through it and critique it if I need to sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all the time.
But
because
you guys just have it was meant to be.
So I think that's a compliment to him, because he writes very different from me. If he's going to write his own thing, he'll write very differently. But when I brought him on, I said, hey, that's great, but you're not going to do that in the Templeverse. We're looking for a certain kind of theme. We want the character to be different, but it's got to fit this style. And so he read every single Templeverse book up until that point. And then he said, okay, I'm going to bring my own voice to it, but it's got to stay in the universe. And so that's just a skill of his that he was able to adapt to my style. But yeah, he's extremely talented. So yeah, he's all the Phantom Queen mythology. That's all him. We'll talk about some picture stuff. That's all him.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we should have had him on here, but I think he's. I think he's too busy working out or drinking protein shakes or something. So.
Nah, he's too busy doing his hair.
Doing his hair. There you go.
And ironing his pink shorts.
So I'm going to pop up on a question we got. What do you feel has been the most challenging Pantheon so far? To me, the answer is obvious. Maybe not, but Christian. That's the most touchy, especially where I live, because a lot of the other religions, they didn't die, but they're not as prevalent to as many people today. Even that's hard to say.
Are you explaining the premise of American Gods right now?
That's what I mean. I think every religion, every belief system makes people touchy. but maybe it's just where I live. It could just be my perception that where I live.
Well, you're in St. Louis, right?
I'm south. I'm in Springfield, so I'm in the Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
So
well,
but it's the
I grew up in
Bible
Tennessee,
Belt.
so it's the bubble. Yeah, it's the Bible Belt.
Yeah,
I totally understand what you're talking about.
So when I moved here in high school, I had to move from my old high school to this part of the state. Very different place. I was in Kansas City, and then I moved to Springfield. Totally different, even though they're in the same state. I found out very quickly that if you're not part of XYZ church, yep, if you're not part of XYZ church, you're blacklisted, and it's not even if I could be a Christian. If I'm not part of this specific church, I'm blacklisted. And so I realized really quickly, like, it's very, very cliquey, I guess you could say. So it's like a gang war between churches. And so I wasn't used to that when I came here, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I don't understand this. I'm a good person, right? And they're like, well, yeah.
That draws me back to Black Sheep.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. So that's where Callie came from. I was like, well, hell, then I'll earn that title then.
Nice.
So that to me personally, I think it might be more concerning or just thought provoking, where I just have to kind of be careful and respectful. But I try to do that with every religion. Especially Hindu. I mean, anything I touch, I try to really highlight some of the cool things, because if I don't highlight enough cool things, I don't have the right to critique. You know what I mean? Exactly. Anyone can critique, but to praise and critique, you have to do those in equal measure. In my mind.
I know, I agree with you.
Yeah. And so maybe that's the trick. Maybe that's the success, is that I compliment just enough to get away with the critique. And
I got a pretty good, we touched on it a little bit, but I got a pretty good follow-up to that question, if that's okay. So for you, this is solely for you. Have you encountered any backlash or serious criticism based on your writing in the scope of mythology?
In the scope of mythology, I don't think so. I've had some people. So anyone who's read my books, no. There's some people that say, "Hey, I get your jokes, but it's a little too much for me. You write amazing books, but I don't want to keep reading that. Whatever."
Because of the childish, perverted.
Yeah, or it could be that
jokes that happen.
You keep making jokes against this thing, even though you praise it. That's great. I just don't. My religion doesn't let me tolerate ridicule of what I believe in, and I'm like, hey, totally respect that. Definitely understand. But I haven't ever got anyone that like rips me a new one or something. They're always like, hey, I can't believe I'm a longtime Christian, and I can't believe I'm laughing at this, but you did such a good job of highlighting things, that people don't know about with archangels or something. And so I hate you and I love you at the same time. And like, I can't tell anyone I read your book. So there's like a lot of closet people that read it, and they just don't tell anyone. But when it comes to ads and stuff, people who haven't read my books and they see a blurb that talks about Christianity or Buddhism or whatever, then they'll try to rip me as something like, oh, you're going to hell.
And I've seen your clapbacks. I've seen your clapbacks. I've dropped in on a couple of them on your behalf as well.
I love that. Yeah. So no, when people have read it, I haven't had it yet. I know it will happen, but I haven't had it yet. So, or at least I haven't seen it.
Well, I mean, you have a lot of potential as far as where the temple verse, hell, even Shade of Devil.
Yeah.
You have a lot of potential of where those can go.
Yeah.
I can easily see Shade of Devil becoming a small TV run.
Yeah.
Or even a couple series of movies.
Yeah.
The temple verse as a whole can go either way.
Yeah. And I'm working on
honestly.
Talking you could left and right. So
I mean, you could be the next, Supernatural, and you have the content for 16, 17, maybe 20 seasons.
Yeah.
Of television, and it's a compelling enough story. And I think now, so let's have a philosophical conversation for a little bit.
Go for it. My favorite.
So on one end, we say everyone is too sensitive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
On the other end, not so much anymore. You can definitely push more boundaries, especially on in the film area, than you've ever been able to before.
Uh-huh.
You know, like I'm also a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
When Star Trek began, it pushed some boundaries.
Yeah.
But if you remember back to that time period, this mid '60s, you couldn't put there. People weren't receptive to a lot of what we see today. So with your writing style, your style of humor, the fact that you can mix so many different cultures together in one place, you've got so much potential to just be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And I just can't wait to see the commercial for a Templeverse movie, or the pilot for a Templeverse series.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, I read those before y'all even knew about any of this. I'm an OG.
There you go. No, I'll be making sure that the Den of Freaks gets a bunch of the extra spots if that happens. So.
Oh yeah, and
that'd be awesome.
It's super cool.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
So yeah. I mean, there are, there are a lot of bubble wrapped people, as I like to call them. Mm-hmm. They're kind of over focused on feelings. In the story that kind of gets back to me is I won't say who it is, but I heard someone telling a story about when they were a kid, they were going to school, and they lived in an inner city, and so they had to walk to school, and mm-hmm. one day they were late, and then they came home and they got in trouble at school, and then they came home to their dad, and they were late because the train got in their way or something, like the subway or something like that, mm-hmm. and so it wasn't their fault. And so they went to their dad, and their dad was like, why were you late for school? And he said, well, it wasn't my fault. The train was in my way. And the dad said, no, it was your fault. And the kid's like, what? And he's like, no, that train goes every single day. You know that train's going to be there. You should have left earlier. And so that is a simple story, simple kind of anecdote, but it's very true, because no matter what happens to you, you choose how you react or how you prepare next time. And so, yes, it sucks that the train was in the way, but what are you going to do about it? And so that's kind of my thing, is that you can have
something that was instilled in me too.
Yeah, like you can sympathize, you can empathize, but I'm not going to be your crutch. I'll be a shoulder for you to lean on to catch your breath, but you need to tell me how you're going to fix it for next time. And that's always been my kind of mentality, and what I want to teach people to do, because it's not easy to tell people to do that. It's very hard. And so it's not that I'm unsympathetic. It's that I'm merciless enough to give you the harsh answer, because that will make you stronger. And I think that's a better answer for you. It's a better medicine.
Oh yeah.
And so I think, it's okay to have those feelings. Of course, you have to acknowledge them, but how are you going to improve? And that's why I include arete in my books, how to become the best form of yourself. Something that Aristotle taught. He taught it to Alexander the Great, and he said, you need to become the best possible form of a thing, whatever it is, horse, military general, soldier, whatever, husband, doesn't matter. And so that's what I try to make my characters do, is they go through hell, but they always get back up one more time, or they always, eventually they get back up one more time. They make mistakes because they're characters, but that's kind of the lesson that I was trying to impart.
Yeah, for me, like that personal mantra, people ask you all the time, how you're doing. Not that they really give a damn, but they ask you how you're doing, and I always say I can't complain. And I'm like, well, actually, I but it's not going to make a difference.
Exactly.
I'm not, accountability was like heavily instilled in me growing up, and it's like, you don't complain unless you have a solution to the problem.
Exactly.
It sucks. It's gonna suck. It's been sucking.
Yep.
Embrace the suck. Move on.
Absolutely, and that's why I put that in there, is embrace the suck. because
that's a military thing too.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you
absolutely.
get told that all the time.
Yeah, it's a Marine. Is it Marine that really is that one? I
I've
can't
heard
remember.
it in all branches. It probably originally generated in the Marines, but I've heard it in all branches. I've heard it across all branches.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is that it sucks, but what are you going to do about it? I mean, the world.
What are you going to do about it? And it should be an answer. And if you should have an answer to what you're going to do about it. Shrugging shoulders.
Yeah. So we got Craig, and he says, "What is the level of your understanding of the Buddha and Buddhism?" Probably nowhere near what it needs to be. That's why I haven't touched it a whole lot. I'm fascinated.
Well, there's so many different sects of Buddhism too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I tried. I touched it, and then I realized that pond went way deeper than I thought. And so, being in martial arts, I was always kind of ancillary to it. We always heard about it, the different anecdotes or parables and stuff. But I didn't realize till I started researching how deep that rabbit hole goes. So probably not enough, and that's why I haven't really included them in the book. I've had Ryu or someone, I think a couple other people mention him and talk about anecdotes or stories, but I haven't dove too far into it. I want to, but I haven't yet. So we've got someone that says, "What inspired Shade of Devil?" That's a good question because a lot of people maybe don't know.
I'm glad that we could talk about Shade of Devil. I was waiting for you to get into it. I know I mentioned it a little bit, but I'm waiting for you to get into it.
So that's the next one. That one's got a ton of Greek philosophy in it, and I don't think anyone expected that. So Shade of Devil, I'm working on book 4 next. And Shade of Devil, I wanted to find the original vampire story. And everyone thinks it's Dracula. It is not. It's a guy named Ambrosio in Greece. And he was the first recorded, at least in writing, story of a vampire type creature who was forced to live in the moonlight because he pissed off Hades, and basically pissed off everyone. But he was condemned to live this life. And so I wanted to write a character with him as the first vampire. And then he kind of gets ousted, corporate takeover by Dracula. And then he comes back. And that's when I start bringing in all the Greek myths like Selene, all the different gods, Hades, Zeus, all this. And so I obviously take a Shayne, slant to it and adjust things like I always do. But a lot of it is 100% true, or at least authentic to that story. So my Shade of Devil series is actually a Greek myth, a Greek origin myth. So, and Ambrosio is really. I picked Soren, but Ambrosio was his real name.
So, if we can talk about Shade of Devil for a minute, I complimented you on this last time, and maybe somebody else has felt the same way, which is why I'm kind of rehashing it with you. But Shade of Devil has a very personal place in my heart for a couple of different reasons. One, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It is downright hilarious it's not funny, but it is funny.
Yes.
Like the very first book where Soren, cell phones. He discovered, he discovered cell phones. Yeah. That is it's real. It's completely realistic.
Yeah.
And I love that you did it that way to make it. It's a fantasy book, but it seems believable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can picture Soren in New York.
Yes.
But it was hilarious because that's not something that someone would think about. Like, I'm sure there's been other stories where you come to somebody from the past comes to the future and then they just automatically understand everything. It's like, like Captain America.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that frustrates me about Captain America. You're gone for 70 years, but you understand everything that's going on in current life.
Just give you did that. Yeah, just give them a
you did this so masterfully, and it cracks me up. And then the bloody part, the blood coffee.
Yep.
That part had me crying laughing. I'm talking filled over, ribs hurting.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's nuts. But the other part that I love, and it kind of goes back to like my childhood. I've never been like super religious. My parents were. My I was raised by mainly by my stepmom, my dad. My stepmom was a Baptist. She's from Memphis. My dad's from Newark, New Jersey. He grew up Methodist, but went to a Catholic school.
Okay. Oh wow.
Weirdest thing ever. And he has my dad has the most beautiful handwriting I've ever seen a person freaking have. Like he used to write me notes for school, and they're like, "Man, your mom has such pretty handwriting." I'm like, "That's my dad." And they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like excellent penmanship, because like that was a class. That's a class
Absolutely.
in Catholic school and whatnot. But I was never like super religious, but I always liked the stories.
Yes.
For what they were. And as a teenager, angelology was one of the biggest things that I was into, because like everybody says things about everybody mentions angels, but what really are angels?
Yes.
And then you open that door and it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
To go down. And it kind of cracks me up, especially because I've looked into it so much, and then if you cross-reference that with actually reading the Bible, you're like, people always say angels as if it's like a really freaking positive thing, but if you look at these stories, they never come here for a good reason.
No.
So you're like, oh, my kid's an angel. That terrifies me.
Yeah, that's horrifying. Like according to a lot of the old stories, yeah, like the Old Testament was rough.
Oh yeah,
rough.
big time.
And
but one of the things that you really impressed me with in Shade of Devil, which I mentioned before, is your depiction of Nephilim.
Yeah.
And I know Laurie earlier, she mentioned Cassandra Clare. That's probably the biggest story recently that mentions Nephilim, and she'd put her own spin on it. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
But somebody, a scholar like myself.
There you go.
Your depiction of Adam and Eve amazed me, blew me away. Matter of fact, I'll tell you, I will tell you exactly what I was doing when I heard, because I was listening to an audiobook that you introduced Adam and Eve. I was in the shower and I almost slipped.
Yeah.
I was in the shower listening and I almost slipped, because I was like, no, he didn't. He did not accurately depict what Nephilim are like, from if you're going all the way back to like the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yep.
What they're supposed to be depicted like.
Yeah. That was my
what?
Yeah.
And that was where for me, I was like, I fuck with Shayne.
Yeah. I
don't care what he does.
Yep.
That's
the guy,
because he paid that much attention.
Yeah, it's like treasure hunting to me. Like, I love looking for those origin stories and the origin details, because if they were that old and those three things were mentioned and saved and recorded, then they lasted 2,000 years. So they've got to be relevant. And
over 2,000 years.
Yeah, exactly, minimum. And so
I mean, if we're looking at, we're talking Book of Enoch.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Way like predates Christianity. Predates Judaism, honestly.
Absolutely. And so when I find those things, it's like a treasure hunt for me, where I'm like, oh man, no one has ever talked about this. I'm doing it. Like, this is cool. And so I love that. That's like my favorite thing. So yeah. I'm glad it resonated, man. Because a lot of people are like, oh, Shayne made this up. That's cool. They don't realize that there's like, I looked into a lot of research to find it. They just think I made it up, and that's fine too.
Well, look, I know when I read that or listened to it, whatever, you know what I meant.
Yeah.
Once I read that, I knew, like, oh, you did your research.
I try, man. I try.
Because that was my, like, as much as I love, because I honestly do love, Cassandra Clare, the Mortal Instruments, Infernal Devices, all of that. That was one thing that always, like, in the back of my head, bothered me.
Yeah, I agree.
She never did that.
I had the same feeling, and it's nothing against her, but it's like, oh man, there's so many things you could have included for origin Nephilim. And the only reason I feel that way is because no one's done it. And so if everyone had done it, like, her depiction would be super cool to me, because it'd be different. And so I think that's all it is. It's just that finding a unique way to tell a story, and pull up facts that no one else has touched.
Yeah, but it's accurate.
Yeah, and that's the crazy
thing. Like, you don't know who knows what.
Exactly.
And you also don't know who you're going to touch. So like, I think I opened up our first call, with a message from my brother. He was like, F Indy.
Yeah.
But what he read that around the same time that he went through like a really bad breakup.
Yep. Yeah.
So
that'll suck.
In that situation, he was Nate. And it's funny because I to this day, like, it was funny. So my brother, like growing up, he was a Tolkien fan.
Okay.
And it's weird because my brother and I are like almost complete opposites. And I don't know if you've seen my brother's Facebook page.
I don't think so, actually. I don't think so.
I'll have to send it to you. But we're complete opposites. But looking at my brother, like if you're gonna judge a book guy by his cover, you would not think he's a Tolkien fan. He is a big time Tolkien fan. Like,
that's awesome.
Like super.
I love that.
So then, Rick Riordan came out. He was big into that. So once I started reading the Templeverse, I was like, oh, my brother's gonna love this.
Yeah.
So I call him up. Hey, you need to read this book. You need to get it. This is what Obsidian Sun is the first one. Read it. He's like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. This, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. He went to go visit my parents. He was on a drive back. He didn't feel like listening to music and everything. So he's like, hey, he calls me up. He's like, hey, what was that book that you were telling me about? So I was like, Obsidian Sun, Shayne Silvers. Got it on Audible. Listened to it on the car ride home. I think that was a Sunday. By Thursday, he was reading Grimm.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
And I'm like, dude. He's like, I love it. I was like, dude, you should listen to me more often. And now I think he's read all the way through Nate's series. So the Nate Temple series, and then I think he started on. I think he's like 3 or 4 books into Feathers and Fire.
Yeah. And
he cracked me up, and he's like, I was like, dude, you got to read the other 2 series. He's like, nah, I don't do side quests.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you got to read it. So he started reading everything, and it's cool. Like, it is so cool that I can share that little part with my younger brother.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's awesome that it's something that can bring brothers together. So that's super cool.
Oh yeah. And like I said, he loves it, and he's like, wow. He was just as amazed as I was. And I think the opening chapter of Obsidian Sun just hooked him for it.
Yeah.
He has this weird obsession with cows. I don't know what it is. But steering getting cow tits, he was like, oh, I'm in it.
I'm in.
I think that was it.
That's awesome. So I think, what have we been going? We got just over an hour. Okay, cool. So I saw this one too. I've been kind of scrolling.
That is a question that I had for you that I didn't have written down.
The dueling ground. Okay,
yeah.
So we've got this is from YouTube. We don't know who yet. I saw a couple people ask it though. I think.
So Sasquatch from YouTube asked.
Oh, there you go. I thought it was a question about Sasquatch as well.
No, Sasquatch.
I haven't touched Sasquatches yet. So we've got, how did you come up with the dueling ground? So I can answer that a simple way, and I can answer that with a spoiler that I can't answer with. So there's much
future book.
Yeah, so there's much more to the dueling ground than everyone thinks. And it's hinted at. I mean, it's not a secret. The first time you go there with Nate in book 1, Grimm is terrified of the darkness around the dueling grounds. And then in one of the books, I won't spoil it. Well, it's not a spoiler. In Horseman, Nate gets to see some of that darkness for himself. He gets to go out beyond the torches. I think it was Horseman, or was it 9 Souls? I think it was 9 Souls. Anyway, so there's something to it, to the dueling grounds beyond it. So the simple answer would be the dueling grounds is a great place for me to have some of the biggest battles without destroying everything. But it's also fun because I can use that as a red herring to trick you. And you say, oh, dueling ground's safe. And then I use it in a way that you realize, holy shit, it's not safe at all. like I've done in a couple books so far.
Well,
and so
Nate and the battle between Nate and Mordred.
Exactly.
Totally did not expect that.
Yeah. And so that was one situation. Then I use it again later for another.
I also still don't believe that Nate came up with that on his own.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions there. And so I can say, oh yeah, it's just a place for them to fight. So, that's a simple answer, but that's also what I want you to think. And then I screw with you later. So you'll find out a lot more about the dueling grounds and the dark area beyond. I know I always say that, but that's why I include these places, is because I never just come up with a place for convenience sake. There's usually a lot of thought behind why I pick a place, or why I make a place. So,
sure.
So, yeah.
All right, two things. So I love that you paid great homage to Jacob and Wilhelm in was it book 4, Grimm?
Yep, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Yeah,
I absolutely love that, and I think you have the best badass depiction of the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
Ever.
I like to think so, but I haven't read every depiction. But I like to think I did a pretty fun job.
They were scary.
Yeah.
And
it was really fun to write them. It was dark. Like there's some characters I write where I'm like, man, that's dark, Shayne. You just met a new part of yourself you probably don't want to hang out with. And so
yeah.
So obviously Gunnar.
Yeah, so I definitely love
so Gunnar got a memento from that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we've got Jason Grint, and he said, "Where did you get the idea for Alex?" Multiple. There you go. Lane's pulling them up. And by the way, Lane's doing this on the fly because I'm not telling him which ones I'm pulling up. He's just trying to find the ones that I mentioned. So Lane's pretty awesome. Yeah. But the idea for Alex, multiple different ways. I needed Nate to find out what it's like to be responsible for more than himself. So I needed a child figure. But I also had, again, spoilers, I can't get too far. I needed a character that would fill multiple roles later. And so Alex, I named him after Alexander the Great. That's where I chose the name, because that was. I
kind of picked that up.
Yeah, because that was the depiction of arete from Aristotle, is that he was always saying, be the best possible form of a thing. And he taught that to his student, Alexander the Great. And so obviously Alex Arete is his name. So, but yeah, he obviously was going to fill multiple roles. But I wanted Nate to realize, like a punch in the mouth, that he's got a lot more that he's responsible for than just his friends. So. And I don't know if Lane's going to keep pulling them up or if I'm going through. How many books ahead are you always planning with all your Easter eggs? Believe it or not, a lot of it's planned, but there's tons that's not. There's tons that just kind of comes to me and I'm like, oh man, that's going to be perfect. Let me just throw that in here and I won't touch it for 3 more books. That happens all the time. But some of the bigger ones like Dueling Grounds, Alex, some of the things I've met so far, I know that there's going to be multiple purposes for them later on. Callie, like her name, things like that.
I think
a lot of it's.
Yeah, I think that it depends on how where how you're looking at it. So one of the things that I love is that you write these books in a way that you don't have to read the other 2 series for it still to be consistent. There might be minor loopholes, lighter plot holes in between, but you don't have to write it that way. But if it depends, I think it really depends on how you read it, because I can think back to, even, book 1 or book 2 and see some Easter eggs that aren't revealed until book, 3 or 5 in one of the other series.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
And I guess it also depends on how you're reading and experiencing the story as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a maze, and that was somewhat accidental, obviously, but somewhat intentional. Like I knew, like at first when I started Nate, I didn't know I was going to have a Callie series. I knew I was going to have a Callie character, but I didn't know she was going to have her own series. And so a lot of the foreshadowing you see would have been an Easter egg that was her side character story. But then when I gave her own series, I was like, oh, I can make this much bigger. And so, the Easter eggs became much bigger than maybe I originally intended. But yeah, a lot of it's happy accidents. My characters, they drive the bus. So I'll kind of give them a map. And then if they want to go sightseeing on their road trip, I let them. And so a lot of times that works out. Sometimes it doesn't with Callie. I have to kind of, figure out where the hell we are.
I know you say that Callie's the hardest one for you to write.
She is. Yeah, she really is. Just because she thinks differently than I do. She's much more meticulous, and she's more like my wife, where she's more calculating, and I am too, but just in a different way. Like I'm more reactive, explosive, and stubborn, and she's more calculating and devious, and it's fun. It's really cool to write. It's just harder sometimes. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's not your natural thought process. I can totally understand that.
So, and she's a girl too. I mean, that changes a lot of things, just in the way that you're trying to make sure you're not writing a man's voice as a woman, which like so many authors do. They just bomb it. And it's like, I really got to step back after I write Callie and say, okay, did I write this as Nate or did I write it as Callie? And so I have to kind of reassess. And so she takes a lot longer to do. And I'm just reading through the comments here. There's some spoilers that I can't get into. So if I'm not reading your question,
please don't, no spoilers.
Yeah, there's a lot of new readers, and I don't want to spoil it because there's some things in the book that when you read, really impacted you or really hit you in the heart, or I don't want to take that from someone else. And so it's not just it's not just the simple act of spoiler alert. It's like some of these are kind of emotional things or things that could help. I started this off talking about how do we make my readers stronger, better.
Some of the parts in the book, if it's spoiled for you and you don't see it play out, it's not gonna the story's not gonna make sense.
Yeah,
it literally all fits together like a puzzle.
Yeah, but it'll be a speed bump, and you might miss the philosophical thing I was trying to lead you to, or the psychological thing, or the self-growth thing, or whatever. And so, so if I'm not answering your question, there's probably a reason. Maybe that the answer is coming in a book very soon. But I'm glad that Brian caught. I haven't touched Sasquatch yet. Sometimes I say things like that just to see if anyone's paying attention.
Anyone's listening.
Yeah.
Like John
So we've got, why did I choose to make Solomon seemingly so flawless? That was an interesting one for me because he was super flawed. Flawed, I don't know. I mean, well, yeah, everyone's flawed. So he had a lot of demons, but he was supposedly the wisest man in the world. And so what I wanted everyone to see was that, I mean, not many people will tell you their own flaws. And so the only people that you meet who knew Solomon are basically his manservant, his protector. And so that guy's not going to talk trash about him. And Solomon's not necessarily going to talk trash about himself. And so I kind of wanted to show people what they expected Solomon to be, the wisest king in the world, richest man in the world, all these things, show them that. And then through later events, you find out that there's a lot of skeletons in the closet that Callie finds out in terrible ways in the most recent 2 books specifically. And so he's not flawless. It's just that the reader and Callie didn't know a lot of things about him yet. So you're starting to find out the last 2 Callie books, Halo Breaker and Angel Dust. You start learning some more about Solomon. So
I love the cover for Halo Breaker. That's my favorite cover so far.
In Halo Breaker, or
Angel Dust? I love that one.
They're both
no cool. Halo Breaker.
Yeah,
well, both of them are cool. But Halo Breaker, I love that one. That's my background on my computer.
Yeah. I love that one. It's the scarf, man. I think that's what it is for me.
Yeah,
and swords too. But
the sword.
I really like that scarf look. Like when we first saw it, I think it was in Whispers when we first used it. And I was like, oh yeah.
And it's kind of the title. The title was kind of badass.
Exactly.
Oh, question.
I
want an honest answer, Shane.
No problem.
So Angelic.
There
just happens to be a Tech Nine album by the same name.
Yes, it does. I'm glad you noticed that. That's both a shout out and just a cool title. Like it worked with what I was trying to do. but it's definitely a shout out because I love that CD.
Well, I also remember
pair of CDs.
Oh yeah, no, it's probably one of the best. Yeah. And I'm actually gonna make some parallels here in a moment between you and Tech Nine.
Nice.
But also, I believe in the first book, there's a allusion that Callie is a Tech Nine fan as well.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Tech Nine. I met him when I was 16, and I was actually friends with someone who wrote some of his music. Just high school. It was just ironic. Like his older brother wrote for Tech Nine, and Tech Nine was nobody back then. But I was just so impressed with him going at the music industry all on his own. And so whether you're a fan of rap or not, that's fine. I with rap, I like the beat and I love the technicality of the rhyming. It's always fascinating because I love homonyms. I love word games. So when I hear plays on words, I don't care what kind of genre it is, but rap is most notably known for it.
Yeah.
And so I always love
Tech Nine's he's also very deep. If you
he's incredibly
some of his albums,
incredibly intelligent. But he's got an incredible drive. Like he's just chased this career as a self-published rapper. Before it was
and that's the comparison.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the comparison with you and him is that you found your own lane, you stuck to it, and you ran through it. And actually, I think it's better for the readers.
Yeah, I think it is too.
I really do. One of the most frustrating things to me. So, like, for instance, Patricia Briggs is one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
I picked up Moon Called back in like 2010, and I've read every single one that she comes out with. Mm-hmm. But it's a freaking calendar year every single time between a book.
Yep.
And depending on what's going on in my life, I might miss it. Yep. It might be 2 books, 3 books later before I realize that she published.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I don't have to deal with that with you. Like there's a book at least every other month or every 3 months.
Yep.
Without fail.
Yep.
So, I always have, when it comes to you, I always have a list. And I love that. And I think it's easier for the reader, but I also think it's easier for you that you don't have to deal with all the red tape and bureaucratic BS to publish your book. Therefore, there's not as many, plot holes in the story as well.
There's also a lot
you can go from one right to the next.
Yep. There's also a lot of freedom where I can speak directly to the reader. Because in a lot of these situations with traditional publishing, you've got so many sensitivity readers and editors and business people that are saying, no, we've already got a wizard, or we've already got this kind of person, or this kind of witch, or an Irish druid, or whatever. And I don't think I could say that, but but you've already got a druid of this kind that lives in New York or whatever. And there's so many rules that they're making a business decision, which is important. They don't want you to cannibalize each other as authors. But at the same time, their delay of 24 months or 18 months also makes those rules that they imposed on the author obsolete. And so it's like the author followed the rules of the moment for their launch 2 years later. And so 2 years later, it's a completely different landscape. And so all the readers have already read a bunch of books following those rules from 2 years ago. So they don't care anymore. You're just going to look like you're copying them, even though you might have come out first. So I think the self-published, just the speed of it, lets me just interact with the readers directly. And then I talk to them and they say, I talk to them directly and they're like, oh, I really like this. I really like that. And I'm like, cool. I can immediately apply that feedback. It's just a better experience, I think.
I love it and I appreciate it too.
Yeah.
All the way through. I'll call you for some time. You're purchasing and a series of books. Would you recommend that you start on?
Yep. So I would start with. So this is Dusty. He's saying, "What book should I start at?" He said, "I followed you for some time, and your books seem very interesting. Your name sounds really familiar, by the way, Dusty. But anyway, I would recommend. Depends on what you're into. Maybe put a post in the Den of Freaks on Facebook and ask them or tell them what you're interested in. I've got 3 series that kind of cross together chronologically, and then I've got a separate series about the original vampire, Shaded Devil. I think if you're here and you've been watching all this and you haven't turned it off, then you probably like any of my books. But start with Obsidian Sun is probably the best bet. That's Nate Temple's book 1. So I would start there.
I also like the spin that you. If we could talk about Shaded Devil for just 1 second, I like the spin that you put on some of the characters.
Which ones
in there? Like particularly one that stands out is Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah. She is my favorite.
I love messing with the tropes. I mean, I'm always trying to destroy tropes, so it's one of my favorite. Yeah, there you go, Dusty. I was gonna in Warrensburg, I think, right? No.
Oh wow.
I was gonna say, man, I was like, I recognize that name, dude. Yeah, so we went to school together. I didn't want to say that and then be weird if I was wrong. Cool. Dustin, yeah, man, that's awesome. Small world. So totally threw me off track when I saw that. So
he knew Shayne before the beard.
Yeah, before the beard, because I only got the beard like 20 minutes ago. That's when I hit puberty. So someone said, do you guys hear Gambit from Marvel when Alucard talks? I do. That was kind of my intent.
A little bit.
I always loved Gambit.
Yeah.
Like, Gambit was one of my favorites. And I wanted to make that kind of accent. So yeah, if you pick that up, then you read my mind. That's what I was kind of aiming for.
Yep.
So I think we're probably wrapping it up here. I think we're pushing an hour and a half now.
Yeah, about an hour and a half. Yeah.
I'm looking through for some questions real quick.
When you write a mythological character, what is your mental process when you decide on certain personalities that don't have a lot of written history? Ooh.
So Ariane,
I would have thought of a question like that.
So when I write a mythological character, she asks, what's your mental process when you decide on certain personalities that don't have a lot of written history? So one of the processes I use with any character, whether they have a lot of material or not for me to research, is I read what I can, what I know, even if it's anecdotal and jaded one way or the other. I'll read it so I can understand, and then I kind of do a thing called a memory palace, where Nate actually does that in one of his books, and I invite him to a place that's very much like Achilles' heel. It's a place that I kind of just put together in my head, and I'll have Achilles be the bartender, and then I'll have Nate sitting there, maybe Hemingway, some characters that I think would kind of jive with this person. And then I just imagine me sitting there and them walking in, and I'm just an absent observer or non-participating observer, and I'll kind of watch them. And I'll watch how they interact, and I'll kind of just say, okay, I know these things about this person. They would probably react this way, or they'd probably give Nate the stink eye, or they might like snort or like look at him or be kind of an asshole to him, or they might really like Nate, or they might hate this other person. And I just I try to learn as much as I can about them through this memory palace and just kind of understanding human nature and psychology. And then I'll just start interrogating them. I'll have myself come up to the bar and start asking them questions like, I heard this story about you. Are you the guy who did this? And I'll just kind of flesh them out. And I'll make up things, if I don't, if there's nothing there, obviously I have to make a lot up. But I try to stay as true to the genuine nature of the character as I can. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So if not, I just make them really interesting and keep as much as I can that's already there. So, but it's fun. It's fun coming up with any character. And then I give them some flaws.
I got one. I think we talked about it last time, but I saw a post. I think it was last month, and there was a little bit of a debate in the den about it. Othello.
Yeah. So
if you read or if you listen to some of the audiobooks, I know me personally, I listened to the very first version of Obsidian Sun. And that one, Othello had a Russian accent. In the newer version, she doesn't. But then if you listen to her in Phantom Queen Diaries, she has an accent.
Yep. So some of these things are, yeah, they just happen. She, in my book, she wasn't supposed to. Cameron, there's a couple. Cameron and I talked about this a lot, and he obviously showed off a lot of her Russian heritage, and there's a sneaky answer to that everyone's going to find out soon. But it was, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. They heard the name Othello, they heard that she spoke Russian, and the narrator ran with it and just gave her a hardcore Russian accent. And I didn't know anything about audio, so I was just like, oh, cool, I got a narrator, yeah. Like, I had no idea that I needed to like proof listen and all this stuff. And so I had no clue what I was doing. And so I was like, yeah, I got a narrator, and he's an extra in an Iron Man movie, and this is awesome. I had no clue what I was doing because I just wrote books. So to me, it was a great success. But then later I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that they did hardcore Russian accents. And then Cameron, ran with it. And I was like, well, it works. It just wasn't my intent. So it works either way, but it wasn't my intent.
I enjoy it. I enjoyed it in the original Obsidian Sun. I also enjoyed it. Is Amanda Lee Cobb? Does she do the Queen? And Nicole Poole does Southern Fire, but I love her voice.
Amanda's amazing. I love her accent. Like, I love everything about her voice for the audio. She just nails it. I love her.
Yeah, so it works for me. The previous narrator for Obsidian Sun, he did a really good one too.
Yeah,
and like for me, I guess that's the beauty of different editions. I guess that was my first impression of Othello. So when I hear her now, it's like
that's the thing, is like you're gonna hear it differently now forever, and it's like whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I think that's pretty much
really
it.
Good.
Hour and a half here. I can keep going for hours, but I've got to go give the kiddos hugs and kisses since I didn't get to talk.
Yeah.
We'll be back tomorrow. Say we got plenty more, and I won't be able to do this probably till Sunday, but I'll be going through the comments on all these videos and trying to answer any that I missed. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the questions. They're funny. I can't read it because they're spoilers, but Samantha Rooney asked a really funny one. I'll be trying to go back through the comments and answering everybody. So if I didn't get to your question on the video, don't worry about it. But if you did post a question, I'll be including you in the drawing for prizes that I talked about earlier. So we got a whole bunch of prizes. We got Kindles.
You might win a call with Shayne Silvers.
Yeah, that can be a prize too. You could be a character in a book. You could be win a call with me like Devine did. We had an awesome chat for like an hour, I think.
Yeah, and I was totally trolling when I won. I wasn't expecting to do anything. I was just went in and it was trolling Shayne most of the time on the videos.
I think that might have been the competition because I do that all the time. Where I ask you guys to roast me. But yeah, so this was a blast. I love talking about this. I know we kind of dove into philosophy a little more than maybe as much as the mythology, but if you have any questions, to me they're the same. That's kind of why I started that way, is that mythology was the gateway drug for me into philosophy. So just heroism, trying to find heroes. So that's what mythology means to me. So but I'll jump through and try to answer these over the weekend, maybe Sunday, Monday. But I had a blast. Thank you so much, Devine. I told you.
Hey, no problem.
Minute. I was like, hey, last minute.
I'm glad you sent the message, man. I was having a rough week, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna take Friday off.
I appreciate it, man. No, this is awesome. So yeah, Devine's awesome, guys. If you want to mess with someone on Den of Freaks and chat with them, he's hilarious. So good man. So. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you helping out, man. This is a fun talk.
Oh, always. Anytime.
And I will see you guys all tomorrow.
I will see you.
All right.